memorial service for Brother Duane and Miss Marilou. I didn't get to know them that long. It was full of experience, though. I remember Marilou telling about the first time that they came to this church. She had this need to get up, and she says, "Duane, we got to get up. We got to go." "Well, where are we going?" "Well, I don't know, but get up and get dressed." And he says, "Okay, well, get dressed." "And where are we going?" She says, "I don't know yet, but you need to get up and get dressed." So, okay, so they got dressed, and he says, "All right, let's get in the car." He says, "Well, where are we going?" She says, "I'm not sure." She says, "Just drive around." And I remember Marilou saying, "Well, he looked at me like I had lost my mind." And then she says, we were driving right here, and I says, "Pull in here, pull in right here." She says, "We were late, but we came to church." She goes, "And we set foot in those doors, and we knew that's where we needed to be." And she told me that story a couple of times. And what a blessing. I don't think that, well, I don't feel that talking about when they were born and talking about some of the other things that happened in their life, not for the purpose of this memorial service, because I don't think that that's what they would have wanted. I believe that what they wanted was to not have a memorial service.
Then it's a remembrance.
But yes, we're doing this in remembrance. And I think that the best way we can do that is to talk about them while we knew them. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if any of you recognize or not, but the background of that picture is actually the painting that's on the side of the parsonage where they got married.
Oh. I took that picture.
You took that picture?
Yeah.
I wonder why it looks
They definitely had some ups and downs. I remember Miss Marilou was talking about, I forget what specific, she says, "And Duane was about ready to skin me alive." Duane, I think, was a little reluctant to let me in because of some things that had happened in his past. And I would usually call because he didn't necessarily want me just to stop by. And I would call and we would talk for a few minutes, and he'd say, "Well, thank you, Pastor, so much for calling. I appreciate that." Finally, one day I says, "Do you mind if I come over?" And he says, he says, "Let me call you back." He says, that would be, he says, "I think so. Let me call you back." And I said, "Well, Lord, there's another opportunity. I'll be doggone if he didn't call me back in about half an hour and says, 'Hey, could you come over next, Monday or Tuesday or whatever it was?' I think this was on a Thursday." And I said, "Well, sure, I'd love to." And I wanted to jump at the chance. And we got there and we talked a little bit. He didn't have a whole lot to say. We just chit-chatted about a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And he says, he says, "I really love where our church is now." And I said, "Okay." And he says, "And you didn't have a whole lot to do with it." Okay. He said, "But God has used you." He said, "God has used you to be the tool or the instrument, that the thing," was what he said, "the thing that we needed in order to be where we are now." And I was just so humbled to be a part of where we are now. And finally he said, "Pastor, you and I never got to know each other really, really well." Correct. And he says, "But I sure am grateful for you and your family." And that, to me, said volumes. Not of any sorts of pride, but of humility, being the servant that I needed to be. And Marilou and I spent a fair amount of time together. Seemed like a lot of it was in the hospital at first. And there was a couple times she says, "I need to tell you something," and it's about a specific subject. And I said, "Well, I don't think I need to know." And she says, "Well, I'm here and in charge, so you're going to sit down and shut up, and I'm going to tell you." That would be Marilou. And she did. And she was very supportive. Both were very supportive of this church. Towards the end, it got a little more difficult for them to show up on Sundays, but they made efforts to be here. Maybe just barely dragging in, but they came in. And they worshiped with a full heart, no matter what the physical side of them was at. No matter how they felt so much. I remember the first time they were there, Mary looked over and Mary Lou's doing one of these. Well, then I found out later, and it didn't really bother me, but I thought, man, she is out. She had narcolepsy, and I didn't know that. So she's almost sawing logs, and I thought, you know, I'm not being quiet today, but she is really sleeping. Well, she had narcolepsy, and she was down. And then, you know, she came to, hey, it's time to go, and she says a wonderful sermon. I kind of looked at her, and she told me later, she goes, just because I may not be awake, she goes, I still hear it. And then she said, rattled off a couple things I said, and I was like, I'll be doggone, I'm going to have to try that. But she said, please don't be offended. She says, I have narcolepsy, so if all of a sudden I'm sleeping, she says, don't be offended. And okay, and I wasn't, and never did get offended about that. Those are some of the good memories I have, and today is about remembering them. And I know that not everyone here got to know them. I didn't get to know them as much as I would have liked, but definitely better for it. I'd like if you can either stand up where you are or come up here and say something. I'd just like us to share. Anybody?
I would like to. To me, they were the Spitfire and the teddy bear.
Yes, ma'am.
They were two really amazing people, and I love them. They drove me crazy. They broke my heart, but I'm so blessed to have them in my life. She was my red-headed Cajun queen, wore shoes and jewelry, and she knew what to do with. Always had an opinion, and didn't hesitate to let it be known. I know no other woman who is loved like Duane loved you. Even times when I swore she'd kill each other. I know you both dwell in the kingdom of God with Cujo and Kitty Kitty. By your side now, no pain, suffering, or worries. And I hope someday to once again hear Duane say, looking good, looking good. I'll bring a salad and a fried bread.
Thank you.
Duane was my best friend. It didn't start out that way. He was kind of hard to get to know, as I'm sure all of you know. He was actually kind of gruff and sounded and acted sometimes like he didn't like you. And the next time you talked to him, he was your best friend. He was a good buddy. He was always willing to chop stories. You know, he loved telling you stories about his days in the oil fields, his days working at the gas station. As a child, or a kid, he wasn't a child, about 16, 17 years old, he bought a brand new Chevy car. And it was the one they call, the motor in it was called the Rock Crusher. And the car people know probably what that was, but it was a 409 Chevy. The Beach Boys even wrote a song about it. And here this guy was, and I'm just envious as all get out when he was telling me the story. But here this guy was, 16, 17 years old and driving around in a brand new car. And I just couldn't imagine that, But he says, I bought it, but I think Mother helped out. I'm quite sure Mother helped out a little bit, probably a lot. I got to really know Duane when he was going, we were going to dialysis. When he was going to Yuba City for dialysis, I would drive him over most of the time. And they allowed me to go in and visit them. Duane had a TV right there and never turned it on. And I kept asking Duane, watching this or something? He said, he couldn't sleep. He couldn't go to sleep when he was sitting there, but he would sit there. And we would talk about just about everything there was to talk about. He told me one time what a great dancer he was. He said, and Marilou backed him up, says, yeah, we'd go dancing and the ladies would come up to him and say, is it all right if I dance with your husband? She said, sure, go ahead. Duane loved to dance. He invited Vicki and I out one time to go dancing with him. We went to a concert, and you could dance at this concert. And I reluctantly got up to dance after Duane and Marilou both said, and Vicki was kicking me this time. And Duane and Marilou says, come on, you got to get up here and dance. And Duane, I'm expecting to see this fantastic dancer up there. And what I seen made me feel better. He was a terrible dancer. He really was. But he thought he was good, and she thought he was good, and that's all that mattered. He would tell me about his stories. He'd tell me stories about when he was going fishing. He'd be working the oil fields or driving a truck, or one of the two. And he would come home and grab a gallon of iced tea, because he'd already drank the first gallon while he was driving or working on the oil rigs. Come home and grab him a gallon of iced tea after working 12 hours and go out and jump in his boat and go salmon fishing. Well, I don't know how he caught a lot of fish, but apparently, according to him now, he caught a lot of fish. And he told him the story of a guy driving by him one day and saying, hey, Duane, wake up, you got a fish on. Duane was sitting there in the seat sound asleep. So Duane jumped up, grabbed a fish, and he landed the fish. Anyway, the two of them, when we first kind of started hanging out together, I thought they hated each other. I truly did. I thought, boy, this couple, how they stayed long and married for 47 years. And at times, I think almost anybody would have thought they hated each other if you listen to them talk. But Duane, I made the mistake early on. I made a mistake. I called Miss Marilou. I was talking to Duane. I said, well, Miss Mary Ann, and oh my goodness, you'd think that I committed the biggest sin that had ever been committed. Because he glared at me and shook his finger at me and says, Miss Marilou. Oh, I'm sorry, Duane. And I was a little bit, like, wow, sorry. I really didn't mean to upset you. It just was slip, We had a neighbor named Mary Ann, so. But anyway, after I got past all of the gruffness and the growling and the talking, the way he talks sometimes, I got to know the man and the lady pretty good. And it's like Vicki said, he was a big teddy bear. He really was. They're probably their biggest mistakes in life were trusting people that they shouldn't have trusted. Mm-hmm. their hearts were too big. And I think toward the end that they were trying to close their hearts a little bit, because every time it seemed like they would befriend somebody, maybe not every time, that's not fair, but a lot of times they would befriend somebody, they would take advantage of it. And it would break both of their hearts. So toward the end, they were kind of hard to get to know because they were protecting themselves. But I will always remember them. Miss Marilou never had there was never a subject that she did not have an opinion. It might not always be right, but I learned how to deal with it, you know, because I'm kind of the same way. I have opinions about almost everything.
Oh, yeah.
She told somebody something once, and I confronted her with it, and she melted. She just went, like, you know, I kicked her or something. I don't know. But anyway, she apologized to me and we got along just fine, because I knew that I could speak up. If she said something I didn't agree with, I could say it, and she would accept it. She might not like it, but she'd accept it. So, but those are some of my memories of Duane and Marilou. Thank you.
I'll speak. I'm not going to get up too nervous. I took care of Marilou the last 6 months of her life. I was more of an acquaintance prior to that. She was closer to my sister, who did this wonderful display, by the way.
Yes. Very good.
And she told me lots of stories that she didn't even tell my sister, so that made me feel kind of special. She was very stubborn. When they told me how stubborn she was before I started to help her, I had no idea just how stubborn she really was, and I learned very quickly. But I think even though we drove each other crazy and wanted to escape each other often, we had a great admiration and love for each other in the end. But I have a lot of respect for her just because of the person that she was, the person that she was in the end, which I feel is the most important. And she was a very strong, strong-willed, strong woman in general. She had a lot of medical issues, and she handled them with grace, which I admire. And she loved her pets like they were her kids, so I definitely with her on that one. Yeah, definitely with her on that one. And I, even after she passed, I abided by her wishes for her animals and things. And I miss all three of them. I miss Mr. Kitty, and I even miss Cujo. And we all miss Cujo. Right. I definitely miss her and her spunky, fiery ginger snap that she was. She actually said that I made better chicken and dumplings than her niece, so that always made me feel good. And like Bill said, they ended up trusting people that they shouldn't have, but she always told me that she looked at me like a daughter, and funny enough, same name as her daughter, but that she was very safe and very loved when I was there, so that was nice. I miss her. I do. There are moments that I stop and think of her, and I smile and laugh, and occasionally tear up about. But she is in the one place that she talked about the most, and that's heaven. And how much she loved Jesus. That was always the first thing out of her mouth usually, was how much she loved Jesus. So I'm just glad that she's where she's always wanted to be. She's back with Duane and Mr. Kitty and Cujo, and that she is definitely not moving forward. So that's my memory of her. I miss her and miss the time we had together. but also kind of glad that.
Oh, goodness gracious, I wasn't gonna talk. So Young Fairy thinks I'm terrible at words. Up here. Um, well, I'll go back to what you started with. The first day they came to church, I think I was 12. And you know, we know it all 12-year-old. And you know, I had a rough start of life, and so, you know, I was snotty and, you know, just a 12-year-old. But they came to church, and I don't know, something about her, I was just drawn to her. I think we just both hated people equally and just thought that we were, you know, just didn't need anybody for nothing. And somehow that grew into a friendship with this, you know, 40-year-old woman and a 12-year-old girl. So, you know, she considered me her daughter. Boy, did that make my mom mad. She doesn't like to share. But, you know, I just remember it was awesome because, you know, like, she was just a stranger and she decided that I was worth love. And that was a great feeling. Especially, you know, going through everything I went through as a kid and getting adopted by my aunt and uncle. You know, that's like a family obligation, you know, and it's like she was the first adult in my life that just chose to pick me as a person, as her person. And I never realized how important that was until, you know, I was older and had kids of my own and done a lot of personal growth and like understanding of how people work, you know, and so it was just awesome. When I was pregnant with Savannah, you know, Kevin and I were just starting out, and she just went and she bought a store worth of stuff and brought it to my house. And I just remember like going through all that stuff, and I just could never understand why somebody who didn't owe me anything, or who wasn't like obligated to be around me, like chose, you know, it was the first person who just chose to be in my life because they liked me, you know, and that made a really big impact in my life. And we stopped coming to church because we moved, and then we moved back, and I had Savannah, and then life got in the way of everything, and I lost touch with them, you know, and got busy, and she kept, and then when you guys started coming to, when Jeff and Alicia took over the church, I got an email, I think, every week for like a year. You should really come back to church. We got a new pastor and his wife, and they got a really young family, and I just think that it would be great for you guys. And she just kept every day, like almost every day, she'd just pop into my little Facebook. Oh, hey, how you guys doing? You should really come back to church. You should really come back to church. And I'm just like, okay, Marilou, leave me alone. Like, go away. But then one day I was just like, okay, fine. Basically to get her to leave me alone. I was like, fine, because we all know if she had an idea, it was her idea until you listened to her. And so we came back, and we came here, and we tried it out. And my sister came with me. And they weren't here that day, of course. The one Sunday we decided to come, they were out sick. And so I was like, okay. And Kevin wasn't here. It was just me and Donna and Savannah, and I didn't even have Oliver yet. And then we came back a few months later with Kevin, because I was like, oh, there was something about Jeff. It was just something about Jeff, just Jeff. I was like, oh, Kevin would really like this, because Kevin's a very, very particular person. And so I convinced Kevin to come back, and I think I was June, so I was almost due with Oliver, and then Marilou was here, and then she just kept going, oh, did you like it? You should come back, you know, and then so we reconnected there, and then she brought us here. She brought us back here, you know, and it was great. I think almost life-changing. I mean, we had Oliver, and Alicia came and saw me in the hospital, like after knowing us for like a month. She's like, can I come see your baby? And that was all because of Marilou, you know. She brought us back here, and we've been here for almost 4 years. And, you know, that's what she did. She was quiet about what she did. they were never boastful or braggy or they never did anything because they wanted like accolation or, you know, acknowledgement. They just did stuff because it's what they felt was right in their hearts and souls. And you know, and we're very grateful that she brought us back here. It was all her. I mean, you guys kept us here, but it was her that brought us back here. And, you know, I don't know, she was like my mom, my second mom, and she told me that I was the closest thing she ever had to a daughter, that I was her daughter. And like, that's like a special thing, you know, to know that she impacted my life that much and I impacted her life that much. There's not much else I can say. And Duane, he was just along for the ride, you know. He was just there. They loved each other to death, and he just wanted to spoil her rotten and treat her the best way he could. And he did, you know. He gave her everything that she ever wanted. All 900 pairs of shoes, 10,000 pieces of jewelry that she doesn't need or want, you know, she didn't need. He was a great example of what a husband should be, in my opinion. And boy, did they, you know, hate each other. But, you know, that's how they communicated, and that was it's always interesting to see when I would go visit and talk to them, and it was just, they were bickering and yelling at each other from across the room, but it was always with love. Mm-hmm. Even though it sounded like they, you know, one was gonna go get a knife and murder the other one. It was always, at the end of the day, it was always with love, you know. And I think that when he died, it broke her heart, and she tried to fight as long as she could. And I was glad that I was able, that she brought us back here and we reconnected, and that I was able to be there for her last, you know, year-ish. You know, and I did the best I could to make sure that she knew that she was loved and that it wasn't her stuff that mattered, it was her. You know, because that was always her thing. She always was like, you know, oh, everybody's only here for our stuff. They only love me because of my stuff. And I hope that she knows that that was never me. I was here for her. It was never her stuff. You know, and I think she knew that about us. It was not about her stuff for us, for our church. It was about her and her little Spitfire attitude. But, yeah, I don't know. They were great people, and I was lucky enough to have them come to our church and meet us and pick me as a person that she decided she wanted in his life. And that was hard because they didn't have, you know, they had a pretty rough go at it. So, I don't know, terrible words, but hope you understand what I meant. Mm-hmm. But they were pretty special people. And they'll be missed, but I do have to say that everything they did ginormous. You know, if they loved you, they loved you. If they didn't, you knew it. Yeah. So, and I wore her brooch because she has a thing for brooches. Yeah, come on, if you want.
Does anybody have anything else they would like to share?
I didn't know them a ton. I only knew them from when they came to church and the couple times I visited each of them in the hospital. But in the little time that they knew me, they did touch my life in a big way. Mr. Duane wasn't just cautious of my dad at first, and he had every right to be. But I'm just as stubborn as he was. Every Sunday I'd come and I'd give him a hug and I'd greet him with a smile. Every Sunday that he came. And I remember the first time, it was about 5th or 6th time that they came in. And he smiled back at me and he hugged me back and he says, "Good morning." And that was a big thing. In a way, they each reminded me of a grandparent from one of the sides of my family. Miss Marilou, with her very unique character, reminded me a lot of my great-grandmother, whom I love a lot, with including her stubbornness, her opinionated, and just her very big heart. And Mr. Duane reminds me of two of my grandparents. He reminds me of my great-grandpa and my dad's dad. Both on my dad's side. Which I think is one of the reasons why I was so eager to get him to smile. Miss Marilou was very caring. She was a lot quicker to hug me back and say good morning than Mr. Duane was, but it was still evident that she was also cautious. And eventually, when that cautiousness did leave, it was like having another set of grandparents for that short time. And when I went to visit them in the hospital, the first thing Miss Marilou did was open her arms and look at me and my brother. And though I didn't have as rough of a start as some people who knew her, when someone you barely know, much like Saya said, chooses you to be loved, that's a very big thing, no matter the length of the time. And she'd hug me, and she even one time told me, when I was just sitting down and talking with her in a pew, she told me, you know, I know you're gonna get a boy sometime soon. She's wagging her finger at me and everything. She goes, you make sure that boy treats you like the good girl you are. Or I swear it doesn't matter where I am, he and I are gonna have a good talk. I was like, okay. It doesn't matter that she's in heaven, I still believe her. I believe that if she somehow found out that my boyfriend was not treating me correctly, I believe that she will come to him in a dream and tell him. But he is. And I feel that she would be very happy. And I do wish she was here to see how this church has grown and turned out. I wish she was here to meet everyone who has joined that didn't get to meet her. And I feel she'd be very proud of all of us for how the church has turned out. Because even while we were in the hospital after her surgery, she'd ask about the church constantly. Sometimes multiple times in a visit. She'd ask about the church members. She'd ask about Saya. She'd ask about Mr. Bill and Miss Vicky. She'd ask about Mr. Tom, Miss Amanda. She'd just ask about the church, how it was doing, and if there was any way she could help, even if she was laying in a hospital bed. I want to take that, and I want to do that too. They've both inspired me a lot. Because, as everyone here has said, Mr. Duane was a teddy bear once you got past the casing. You know what they do these days? They make the toys impossible to get out of the bindings. Once you do, every child loves their toys. And I did love them. And I bet they're really happy, especially with how we've all turned out in this church.
Both Marilou and Duane multiple times asked if their salvation was good enough to cover what they had done in the past. I specifically remember Duane and I having a conversation about that. And when I said, well, I think if it has covered me, it's probably covered you too. And he says, Pastor, you don't know what I've done. And I looked at him and I said, I know I'm awfully young. I said, but I wasn't always a pastor. And he stopped. He says, well, that's true. You've probably done some pretty bad stuff too, haven't you? Yes, sir. Real quickly, I want to share one of the first times I went over to visit with them. They got into one of their arguments. And I didn't know that was a regular thing. And I excused myself and left because I thought there was going to be furniture flying or baseball bats brought out or something along those lines. And it was about an hour or so later, Mr. Duane called and he says, hello, and he says, Pastor Jeff? And I said, yeah. He says, what happened? And I said, I left. He says, well, why? And I said, well, you and your wife were having a disagreement and I figured I'd better head for the hills while it was still safe to do so. And he says, oh, he says, well, I'm sorry, we just now realized you were gone. Which is funny because God has unique ways of humbling us. And he says, oh, don't take no mind to that. He says, don't pay attention to that. He says, we do that all the time. And I thought, good Lord. And once I got to know them a little better, yes, it was very true. They would fight like it's almost, an outsider would say that they fought bitterly, but there was no bitterness in it. They fought because they loved to argue. They loved it. I think that was one thing that kept them going for so long. They loved to argue. And they were indeed quite opposite. As far as, now he had an opinion also, and he was no pushover by any means. And he was just as firm as she was, but in a different way. And the Lord brought them together, and they did change the world that they lived in. They may not be known far from Colusa County, but they are very well known to us. And for that, I'm very grateful to have the chance. And they are also now no dialysis, no pills, no meds. You know, I know heaven is a place of eternal glory, but I still question a little bit whether or not they're bickering just for fun in the presence of God. And I'm not saying that to be funny, but I remember thinking about that. Does God let them do that when they did it here on earth? You know, how does that work? But I am definitely better for having known them, and I thank you all so much for sharing. With your permission, I'd like for us to sing a song.
A song? I've got 4.
You can take your pick. And how about you take your pick?
Me?
He has 4 picked out.
We had 4 picked out.
Yeah. You want Amazing Grace, Stan?
Where?
We will have a song and a closing prayer. Thank you. And thank you, Saya, for setting this up. This is absolutely beautiful. And just the pictures through the years, you can
They're in
tell
order.
that. Yes, I saw that. You can definitely.
They're very thorough. All of them are written on the back.
You can definitely tell that they were in it for the long haul.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found.
Father, Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to come together to remember the lives of two people who have so touched our lives. Lord, and in the remembrance, we are saddened, but we also need to remember to take heart, Heavenly Father, because they are both where they have desired to be for such a long time. And Lord, we cannot but help to rejoice in that. Lord, we ask your blessings upon the meal and on those that prepare it. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.